YouTube, the 2025 NBA season is just around the corner at the time you're recording this video, and so I want to do a three-part series on this channel of all my predictions for the upcoming 2025 season in regards to rankings and seeding for the playoffs, and it's going to be the Western Conference, the Eastern Conference, and the playoffs. Three separate videos, folks, and in this video we're going to start with the Western Conference, and if you know anything about the Western Conference, you know it is as loaded as it's ever been. In my estimation, there are about 13 teams that could realistically fight for a playoff spot, and that to me is just wild to think about. That's why it's so hard to rank these teams, but I'm going to do my best job in this video to rank all of them for their playoff seeds, okay? So from 1 to 15, let's get into my prediction of the 2025 NBA season seeding for the Western Conference. Let's go, folks. So as I mentioned, competition will be at an all-time high this season in the Western Conference, but there are actually two teams that I just want to get out of the way really quick. We're going to go from top to bottom, but as I mentioned in the intro, there's about 13 teams that, realistically are looking to make a playoff spot. And so I just want to get these bottom two teams that I believe will be, ranked 14 and 15 out of the way so that we can focus on the primary objective of this video, which is the legit contenders and, teams that are hoping to make the playoffs. So again, after this, we'll go from rank 1 to rank 13. Top to bottom, but again, I just want to get these two teams out of the way. And at the 15th spot, I'm going to have the Portland Trailblazers in the Western Conference for the 2025 season. This is not a mark of the Trailblazers as a whole. Obviously they're engaged in a long-term rebuild process, and so it'd be unfair to say that being ranked 15 in this video isn't actually a good thing for this team because, obviously they're trying to place themselves high in the lottery. So, the Trailblazers have a very bright future and a lot of young players that are super talented, including Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, Donovan Clingan. All three of them I expect to have a big season next year. Scoot Henderson, I think, is going to be a breakout player. I like what the Portland Trailblazers are doing as a whole for their franchise, but I just think, as far as next season goes, they're going to be pretty bottom of the barrel, which again is actually a good thing for their team. Coming in at number 14, I actually have the Utah Jazz. All right. And so another example of a rebuilding team that's trying to, build their future core through the draft. And I think the Utah Jazz have had plenty of success doing this so far, and I would like to see that continue. And that's why I think they're going to be ranked 14, because just like the Trailblazers, they're rebuilding, but they also just don't have enough talent to, hang in there with a lot of these other teams, in particular 13 of them. Larry Markkinen extends on a big contract. I think he's a great, future player to build around. I like the Cody Williams draft pick. I think they had one of the best drafts overall. I think there's just a lot of young talent on this team, and I like what they're doing for the future, but for now, I'm going to have them at 14. I think that's fair to say. Again, this is a good thing for the Jazz. Hopefully they can score a high lottery pick just like the Blazers. But with that out of the way, folks, sorry to Jazz and Blazers fans if you showed up to this video. The rankings to me are more about like the playoff teams, or teams that hopefully are trying to make the playoffs and actually have a chance. And so now we're going to get into the real big dogs, right? So starting with the 1 seed in the Western Conference, I will be having the Oklahoma City Thunder. And it's important to remember that for these seedings, this doesn't necessarily mean teams ranked higher than a different team are going to make it further in the playoffs. It doesn't even necessarily mean that they're a better team. One of the reasons I think the Oklahoma City Thunder in particular, as an example, is going to be the 1 seed is because in the regular season, certain teams are built more for regular season success. Not to say that, teams that are built for regular season success aren't going to succeed in the playoffs, because in the Thunder's case, I think they have a really good chance of that. My point is basically, younger teams with fresh legs and a lot of depth and a systematic approach to, both offense and defense, I think have a lot better chance to win and rack up more games in the regular season. All that being said, I do think the Thunder, just on paper, are the best team in the West. All right. So going into 2025, I think they have, pretty much the best roster, and I think they're going to win over 60 games this season because, for one, not only do you have the proof of last season that you're able to be a 1 seed in this stacked Western Conference, but you also got a ton better, and I think, an A or A+ offseason for the Thunder. Not only do you have a top 5 player in the league, in the world, in SGA, who is a MVP finalist last season, you also have a ton of players that are, set to get better, in my opinion, including the second and third best players on this team, J-Dub, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren, who I both think will have all-star caliber seasons and take that next leap for the Thunder. So the big three and the top end talent is obviously there. Now, when we're talking about the depth, one of the biggest issues with this team last season, in my opinion, was the size on the interior and the rebounding. And so you address that as good as you could have in free agency, getting Isaiah Hartenstein, poaching him from the Knicks, signing him on a long-term deal. He will come in and provide quality interior presence, particularly on the rebounding front. And so, your biggest issue basically solved. You also trade Josh Giddey KD, who was a player that obviously is a young, talented player, but just wasn't quite the best fit on this team, for Alex Caruso, who is, in my opinion, a top 3, top 5 perimeter defender in this league. He is an all-NBA caliber defender every season, and he's also kind of a utility piece offensively. He can do a lot of different things for you, so you make massive upgrades on those two fronts. I actually think the Thunder might have the best defensive backcourt in the entire league, other than maybe the Boston Celtics. And so the top-end talent's there, the depth is there, the coaching is there. You have the Coach of the Year, Mark Dagnall. You have depth at almost every position. That's, competent NBA level players. You also have a lot of youth on this team, and honestly, most of your best players are young and like super young. So I think if anything, the Thunder are going to have a better chance to succeed as it is, just because of their youth. As I mentioned before, younger teams that have a lot of depth tend to win a lot of regular season games because it's easy to withstand the long grind of a season when you have young talented players that always have fresh legs, don't have to recover from game to game, don't have to rest much and load manage and all that stuff. So you're able to rack up more regular season wins. And so you already have the ceiling raising ability of that, but you also have maybe the most talented roster in the league. I just love the Thunder for the 1 seed. I think they're going to win 60 plus games, and I think they're going to be a little bit above some of these other top tier West teams. No question. I think they have to be the favorite to finish with the 1st seed in the West. Coming in at number 2, we're going to have the greatest defense in the league last season, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who improved big time on their, perimeter shot creation, adding Rob Dillingham through the draft. I think that's a great move that addresses one of their biggest needs, and it makes them a lot more dynamic offensively in a half-court setting. This is another thing that I think translates to a lot of regular season wins, is having a, top of the league defense, and I expect that to be the case next season as well for the Timberwolves. Their defense is just smothering. They can basically go against any matchup and provide a lot of defensive versatility with basically any lineup they face. Not only that, you clearly have the top-end talent with Anthony Edwards being, a borderline top 10 player in this league, Karl Anthony Towns being one of the more dynamic second options in the league offensively. I think he's a little bit better of a defender as well than he gets credit for, and obviously Rudy Gobert, DPOY, holding things down in the front court at that center position for the anchor spot. You also have, again, elite perimeter defense in guys like, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, who I expect to take another offensive leap next season, and, Mike Conley as a consistent, reliable playmaker who adds a lot of stability to, your team on the offensive side of the floor. I just think with the defense this team has, they're just going to win anywhere from 50 to 60 games next season pretty comfortably. Again, all of this is assuming, if this goes through for every team in this video, that, there's no injuries involved in their season. So obviously, if everyone's healthy, I just think the defense translates to a lot of big time winning. This is great defense, travels on the road, it travels to the playoffs. It's an identity that I think Chris Finch really leaned into last season and helped them a lot. I think they build on that this season with a 2 seed caliber season. The Wolves are absolutely dominant defensively, and they do have the top end talent. They do have a little bit more depth, and I think it translates to 50 to 60 wins, and they will eventually get the 2 seed in the 2025 season. Listen, there's going to be some controversial picks on this list, and I think there's maybe some other fans that might not agree with this, but I have the Denver Nuggets coming in at the 3rd spot for the Western Conference rankings next season. There's another team that is in this tier of 4 teams that I think could be right up here, right? They could certainly contradict my pick here, but one of the things I think the Denver Nuggets just have that is just basically on a different level than some of these other teams is they have the best player in the world, right? And so there's a clear gap between Jokic and everybody else, and I think Jokic, just having him on your team is going to result in 50 plus wins almost guaranteed, right? We know they lost KCP in the offseason. I do think that is a big loss, and I do think it's a little bit bigger of a loss than people are giving it credit for, and I ultimately think, it could really hurt the Nuggets. But as far as the regular season goes, I just don't know how Jokic is supposed to be anything lower than a 3 seed. Maybe you could say 4 seed at minimum, but I just think Jokic raises the floor of this team so much to basically, like I said, 50 win seasons almost any time. And you also do have Jamal Murray. I mean, another top 20 NBA player in my opinion. This guy is absolutely lethal from the perimeter scoring wise. You have, MPJ coming back, Aaron Gordon coming back. You signed Russell Westbrook, who I think is going to make a big impact on this team in a positive way, and Dario Saric, who I think was a good pickup as well. Listen, the Nuggets might not have the best depth of any team, but they certainly have the best player in the world. And so I think Jokic just inherently is going to give you a ton of regular season success. And so I think it translates to a little bit better of regular season success than some of these other teams. That's why I have the Nuggets 3rd overall. For the 4th seed for the Western Conference, I have the Dallas Mavericks. And I do think there is a case you could make that this team is, anywhere from 2 to 3, right? I think, you could easily say, the Mavericks are a little bit better than the Wolves or the Nuggets. 100% I could see that case. I wouldn't even necessarily disagree, but I do think all of these 4 teams are in the elite tier tier of the West. I think if you had to pick anyone that separates themselves just a little bit, it might be the OKC Thunder, but the Mavs are certainly in the running. And the only reason I have them fourth is because I do think the Mavs are a little bit better of a team right now than the Denver Nuggets, but I just think in the regular season in particular, Jokic is going to elevate the Nuggets a little bit past the Mavericks, all right? And so another reason why I think the Mavericks, regular season wise, might not be the safest bet to be a 2 seed or a 3rd seed. Again, these top 3 seeds are going to have 55, anywhere from 50 to 60 wins, right? And I do think the Mavericks are going to be closer to 50 or 52 wins, but I just think Luka and Kyrie having so much of the offensive responsibility night to night wears on them just a little bit throughout a season, and I think it translates to a little bit more losing than you would expect when you just look at their roster. Obviously, I think the Mavs are loaded in terms of depth. I think they've gotten so much, 100% miles better defensively than they were just like a year or two ago, right? Their defense is going to be really good. Obviously, you add Klay Thompson, who's going to add a level of dynamic floor spacing ability that you can use in a variety of ways off the ball to Luka and Kyrie. He's going to make this team so much more lethal in a half-court setting. I also think he's going to take a little bit of pressure off of Luka and Kyrie because, for one, I think Klay's going to get a lot of open looks, and I think Coach Kidd's going to utilize him in a lot of ways that will lead to successful results. But I also think having, a dynamic off-ball player like that scoring-wise is just something that has to free up a lot of, mismatches, and, it'll be hard to double team with all 3 of those guys on the floor because, Luka and Kyrie command so much attention, but you just can't leave this guy open, Klay Thompson. You also have other shooters around him that are going to be really good, like PJ Washington. And so I like the Najee Marshall signing. I think he adds a lot of, defensive grit and toughness. I like the 2 bigs. I think they're certainly capable of, on both ends, being a nightmare for most teams. But I just think the Nuggets having Jokic is just a little bit better in the regular season. Again, I do think the Mavs are a better team overall. And so hopefully Mavs fans understand where I'm coming from. Don't get too upset about this. I'm not saying they're the 4th best team. I'm just saying they'll have the 4th best regular season in my estimation. So again, those are the top 4 teams. Those are the elite, right? Like that is the tier of team that I think is separated from a lot of, pretty much everyone else, right? You have these top 4 who are kind of similar in terms of, ceiling and ability, right? Everyone else, I think is, you could make a case they're capable of beating one of these teams in a 7-game series. It'll just be a lot tougher. I think they're a little bit just worse overall, but that doesn't mean they're bad. Of course, if you're making a playoff spot in the Western Conference, you're obviously certainly battle tested, throughout this regular season. And for the 5th overall team, I actually have the New Orleans Pelicans. And this might seem like a reach to a lot of people. I know this probably isn't the most popular pick, Pelicans at 5th overall. I know they lost their center. I do believe there is a center issue in New Orleans. That is something they're certainly going to have to work out. All right. But when you just look at the, advantages the Pelicans have over a lot of teams, to me, it's staggering. They have some of the best size in the league, right? Their size is incredible. They can score in so many different ways, especially now adding DeJounte Murray in the offseason. You have 2 elite, shot creating guards from the perimeter, that are capable of playmaking as well. I think you do get a big playmaking boost out of DeJounte Murray. Brandon Ingram comes back. Have to see what happens with him in the future, but for now, he's a Pelican. And I just made a video about how Zion Williamson has completely transformed his body. And I think this will sustain a lot better, consistent, more top tier, regular season results for the Pelicans. They're just loaded all across the board other than center with talent. They have defensively a ton of different things they can throw at you, including Herb Jones, all-NBA defender, one of the best defenders in the league, most versatile, switchable players. They also have Trey Murphy, who is a knockdown sniper off the ball. Decent guard depth with guys like Jordan Hawkins and Jose Alvarado, provide a lot of different things. You lose Najee Marshall. Obviously, it's a big loss, but I just think the Pelicans have a little bit more unique ability than some of these other teams. I think they're going to be a lot more like switchable defensively. I think they have a lot more size than a lot of teams, and I think their dynamic offensive lineups are going to be something really difficult to defend. You have a ton of shooting, you have a ton of shot creation. Think about their first 3 on this lineup. It's going to be McCollum, DeJounte Murray, and Brandon Ingram. That is just elite from all fronts, playmaking especially, and then perimeter shooting, shot creation off the dribble on ISO situations, and then Zion Williamson to just cause havoc in transition. Maybe he takes a leap defensively is what I'm predicting with this new weight loss and stuff like that. So the center is an issue, right? But I do think Yves Missy could provide a better quality rookie than we think. Daniel Tice is certainly a serviceable spot player. I think there has to be something you address there at center, but I don't think 5th overall is a stretch when this is one of the more unique, versatile teams in the league as far as talent goes. They can really throw anything at you on both sides of the floor and do it pretty comfortably and consistently, in my opinion. They also are very well coached by Coach Green. I think the Pelicans are in for a really good season, probably the best of this Zion Williamson era, and so we'll have to see. Hopefully, knock on wood for everybody healthy. Again, that goes for all teams. But again, this might not be a popular pick, but I just feel that way. Another unpopular pick might be the 6th seed, and I have the Sacramento Kings. And there's certainly a conversation to be had about a lot of these other teams, and we're going to have them in a little bit. Obviously, we're going through every team, but for the 6th seed, this is a big deal, right? This is the last, formal playoff spot, okay? And so every other team that's going to have to make the playoffs is going to have to fight their way through the play-in tournament. And if you look at the pool of play-in tournament talent, it's insane that 2 of these teams aren't going to make the playoffs. Anywhere from 6 to 13, only like 3 of these teams can make the playoffs. It's wild that some of the teams that are going to miss the playoffs this year. I don't expect that to be the Kings. I think they have an extremely good bounce back season. They get the 3 seed, have a revitalization of their franchise a couple of years ago, what was awesome to see, and then kind of a little bit of a regression after that, right? So, last season they were knocked out of the play-in tournament, but I don't think people are giving the Kings really a fair shake when you consider how much better they got, how much better they're getting. I mean, for one, you can count on another leap from Keegan Murray, who I think is going to be a extremely valuable 2-way player for this team. I do think he's a much improved defender as well, which again doesn't get talked about. Dynamic off-ball 3-point shooter, way better than his numbers suggest from last season. When you look at De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, these are 2 all-NBA caliber players that have made those teams in the past. I expect all-star production from them. You also are a little bit deeper than I think a lot of people realize, right? Not only in terms of your star power, who you add DeMar DeRozan in the offseason, who's going to just add another shot creator to the mix that is going to be able to get buckets in late game situations, ISO situations. He's just lethal from the mid-range, and he just adds something to the Kings that they really lacked last season, was a 3rd shot creator, okay? And so you have Sabonis, you have Fox, but the 3rd guy was unclear, and now it's 100% confirmed. It's DeMar DeRozan. He's going to add so much versatility to this team offensively, which is really where this team excels. And then you re-sign Malik Monk. You have Kevin Huerter hopefully coming back a lot more productive than last season. If that happens, I mean, they could even be better than the 6th seed. Like, there's just so many things I think could go really well for the Kings, and there's just kind of an afterthought for a lot of people ranking these teams. I just think they're going to be a lot better than people expect, similar to the Pelicans. Again, might be controversial here, but I just have them, having a great bounce back season. I love, the versatile defense of Keon Ellis. I think he's a total dog. I like the Jalen McDaniels addition for some athleticism and length on the wing. Keegan Murray, again, is going to take another leap in my opinion. You had a reliable backup point guard in Jordan McLaughlin for some playmaking stability. And so I just love the Kings, future, and most likely a playoff team for me this season. 6 overall, I think, is an okay spot for them. A lot of people are going to disagree with that, but that's where I have them. And so those are the 6 playoff spots. Now it's time to get into the play-in tournament. All right. And this is where a lot of people are going to be upset with me for having some of these teams where I do, and not having some teams that they really like where I, have them. Let's get right into it, folks. So just before I get into this section, I just want to, reiterate the point that I don't think this makes any of these teams bad, or I'm not even saying that I'm totally going to be right about any of this. These are way too early predictions without even seeing these teams on the floor. I just want to clarify, these teams in the play-in tournament, and even the teams all the way ranked at 13, 12, and 11 are not bad. I actually think they all have a legit shot at a play-in or playoff spot if everything goes well for them. My point obviously being that I just think those 6 teams are going to be a little bit better in the regular season in particular. Doesn't mean they're better teams. It could for some of them. I just think overall this is predicting regular season success across an 82 game season. And I know there's going to be people who disagree. So let's get into the play-in tournament. Again, none of these teams are bad. I actually think some of these teams are exceptionally high ceiling. Some of these teams could even make the finals as far as I'm concerned, and I wouldn't be totally shocked about it. So at the number 7 spot, we have the Memphis Grizzlies. And this is a team I expect to put a lot of things together this season and have a lot more success than obviously last season, which was more of a transitionary period for their franchise. Yet a ton of injuries, people in and out of the lineup, ton of just chaos going on, and obviously it translated into a lottery type of season. This will not be the case in 2025, in my opinion. I think the Grizzlies are due for a monster bounce back season where they win anywhere from 40 to 50 games in this loaded West. All right. So you have, Ja Morant, a Premier League talent at the top end of this roster, hopefully having a, career defining bounce back, comeback player of the year type season. Desmond Bane, I think, is a lot more underrated of a 2 guard than people give him credit for. He's, one of the best in the league as far as perimeter shooting goes. He's an absolute sniper out there, and he's upped his game in terms of shot creation as well. Not to mention, Jaren Jackson Jr., who had kind of a rough one last year. This guy's a freak defender, right? DPOY, obviously, in his past, maybe the best shot blocker in the entire NBA. One of the more versatile, switchable type of defenders. He is an absolute beast defensively, who, I actually think this team's gonna be a lot better defensively than people think. You have a versatile, breakout type of players like GG Jackson that could be in for a breakout season. Whether he'll start or not, I'm not too sure, because you do have Vince Williams, who is a, versatile utility guy guy on both ends of the floor. I think he's a really good defender, super disruptive defender on a lot of different levels. I think he's in for a big season. He's also a capable ball handler, playmaker, and shooter, okay? And then you bring in Zach Edey in the draft and address the center issue with this team so that Jaren Jackson Jr. doesn't have to play center. I love this pick. I've totally switched course on it. If you watch my Memphis Grizzlies deep dive, I was critical of Zach Edey, and the pick there totally changed my mind. I think this guy's gonna be a great NBA center. He just adds a ton of physicality and size to this team on the interior that they've been lacking since Steven Adams. And overall, I just think this team's in for a big one. You know, they're in for a big season, and I think they're gonna, you know, make noise again in the West. This is another team that's really young, and so younger teams with a lot of talent tend to win more regular season games, just kind of how it goes. I expect the Grizzlies to bounce back and kind of, you know, in some way save their reputation as far as Western Conference contenders go. I think they're certainly in the mix for a playoff spot. I could see them realistically anywhere from like 3 to 7 or 8. You know, I think they're kind of in that range, kind of a lot of stuff up in the air, but I just love the versatility of this team on both ends. I think they have a great roster and they're in for a big season. 7th overall. For the 8th seed, another team that I think is just a little bit underrated as far as these Western Conference teams go. Again, this is a kind of an older team as far as their best players go. You know, I do think defensively they got a lot better, and that is the Phoenix Suns, okay? And so you might have a lot of people disagreeing with this. I know they got swept in the first round. I know their roster is a little bit redundant as far as their best players go. Basically have 3 really great shot creators, all right? An all-time great one in Kevin Durant, who's still at a top 10 NBA level as far as I'm concerned. Devin Booker, another guy in that top 10, top 15 range as far as NBA players go. And then Bradley Beal, who could be anywhere ranked like from 40 to, you know, 20. But Bradley Beal, I think, you know, even in his injuries last season, you know, missing a lot of games, he did play really well when he was in the lineup. And I think adding a point guard of Tyus Jones caliber is game changing for this team offensively. One of the biggest problems with the Suns last year was their turnovers. I mean, they had a massive turnover problem. You don't even have a real point guard on the roster last year. And now you add one who is game changing in terms of his assist to turnover ratio, his ability to take care of the basketball and make good plays, good decisions with the basketball in his hands, set these guys up for success, like Kevin Durant, like Devin Booker, like Bradley Beal. The shooting on this team is going to be outrageous. You also had Monte Morris, so the point guard is locked down. I mean, you have exceptional value there on both of those fronts. Shot creation is off the charts. The elite talent is off the charts. Defensively, I think you're a little bit better than maybe I would have thought. Looking at some of these numbers, I mean, they weren't even, you know, bottom half of the league as far as, you know, defensive rating goes. And I do think they got better defensively, you know, bringing back Royce O'Neal on that contract, adding Ryan Dunn in the draft in the first round, who I think actually is probably the best perimeter defender in this draft, right? He's going to be a freak defender. Hopefully he can knock down a consistent 3-ball for your, if you're a Suns fan. You know, the big man situation, I still think they could use a better, you know, backup defensive type of 5. You add Mason Plumlee at the backup 5, but Nurkic, you know, clearly an above average center as far as I'm concerned. He's a great rebounder, great finisher, and really good playmaker and smart player for his position. I just think the Suns are in for a good year. I mean, they basically addressed a lot of the stuff I was complaining about, you know, as a outside perspective Phoenix Suns viewer in the point guard play and the defense, right? So, you know, I just think the Suns get a lot better. I think they have a little bit better of a, just again, a lot of these teams razor thin margin of, you know, how much better I think they're going to be in the regular season than the team even below them, because as we know in the West, even the bottom play-in tournament teams are going to have somewhere close to, you know, 45 to 50 wins. It could be a separation of literally a tie break. So it's not like I'm saying the Suns are miles better than the team behind them. It actually means that I'm saying as far as the regular season goes, they're just like this much better, okay? Suns come in at number 8. I think that's kind of fair. And so at the number 9 spot, I have the Los Angeles Lakers. You know, everybody is saying tons of bad stuff about the Lakers. You know, they didn't get better in the offseason. Listen, I don't think they had a great offseason. I don't even necessarily think they had a very good offseason. It was pretty lackluster in terms of teams hoping to contend go, but you did add a dynamic type of shooter in Dalton Connect, who I think is, again, going to make a severe impact on this team in their perimeter spacing. As we know, when we put shooters around LeBron, good things happen, good results happen. You know, you could say LeBron's old and he can't carry a team anymore. I don't know. I mean, the Lakers were well above 500 last season, and I think they got better. And I also think adding Coach Redick is going to dramatically increase the ceiling of this team. As far as the regular season goes, I'd expect something similar as a result as last season, but you do get a lot of health and, you know, depth back. I mean, last season, Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt just weren't healthy. And so you're basically acquiring these two players as far as like a, you know, abstract way of looking at it goes. Like, you're getting these two guys back who are valuable defensive role players. Your starting lineup is certainly good enough. And I just think this team has the top end talent of, you know, not a lot of teams in the NBA. And I do think they have good depth. And I think adding a coach that, you know, hopefully will provide a lot better results is enough for me to say, like, this team's ceiling is higher than it was last year. I do think a lot of people aren't aren't necessarily thinking about how much different an outcome can be with a better coach. It can dramatically raise your ceiling. And so I have the Lakers at 9. Again, not saying they're bad. I actually think 9 is really good in this Western Conference. And again, Lakers aren't necessarily going to be a regular season team anyway. They're just trying to get into the playoffs. That's all they're trying to do. And then clearly they can, have a tough series with anyone in 7 games with LeBron and AD, a lot of these other role players. So yeah, I'd expect the Lakers to win anywhere from 45 to 55 games, and I think 9's fair for where they're sitting right now. Man, people are not going to like this pick, and they're gonna have a big problem with it, and I'm okay with that because I'm gonna stand on what I think. I have the Los Angeles Clippers at the 10th overall spot. I know it's controversial. I know people are gonna hate this, and I don't care. Listen, the Clippers got a lot of value back in terms of losing Paul George. People think, oh, they lost Paul George for nothing. Right, in the sense that they didn't trade him away and get draft picks back for him. I get what you're saying, but they went ahead and used all the cap space that they didn't have to pay Paul George with and got a ton of versatile two-way role players. I mean, this team is stacked with role players, right? You add Derrick Jones Jr. in the offseason, who had a great year with the Mavericks, was a big part of their finals run. Super versatile perimeter defender, one of the best athletes in the league. He's going to provide exceptional value on both ends next to a guy like James Harden. You still have James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, two of the most elite talents as far as the league goes, even still in their old ages. Harden had a great playoff series last year against the Mavericks. He just did. And so I don't think you can necessarily say Harden is washed. I think his production last year was a result of his decreased role. I think he's going to have a big uptick in production. You also add a ton of role players, as I said, Nick Batum, who is a great off-ball role player. You add Kevin Porter Jr. to come in maybe off the bench and provide a lot of two-way versatility. That way you always have really good point guard play, off the bench. You also add Mo Bamba to be kind of a more athletic, different look at backup 5 from Mason Plumlee. You select Cam Christie in the draft, who could be a good off-ball shooter. You still have Norman Powell, who I think is one of the best 6 men in the league. I think he, clearly is a great, shooter and playmaker as far as shot creation goes. You still have Ivica Zubac, who I think is one of the most underrated centers in the league. Clearly a well above average center. I think he's a lot better defender than people give him credit for. And he's a great, pick and roll finisher, great roll man, great screen setter, really, good pairing with James Harden. I think James Harden's going to be, a much more heliocentric Harden next season. And I think that bears better results for the Clippers, as Harden is still, capable of providing 20 and 10 type of seasons on really good efficiency. Kawhi Leonard, hopefully, knock on wood, if he's healthy, can provide similar production to what he did last year, where Kawhi Leonard had some of the best numbers of his career efficiency wise. Offensively, he was a game wrecker offensively, for the opposing defenses. This guy was money efficiency wise. All right. So he still has all the ability, just knock on wood for health. Right. And so, defensively, I think this team makes a massive leap. All right. This team is going to be very, very good defensively. That's going to be part of their identity. Offensively, maybe a little bit worse without Paul George. Right. But you do get a lot of value back for him in free agency. So this team is still really good. I mean, this was a playoff team last year, and they had really bad stretches of the season because, acclimating James Harden took a little bit of time. But I just think on the lower end of things, you could say maybe 11 or 12 as far as their seed goes. On the higher end of things, you could say this team is at the top of the play-in, right? They have tons of talent, man. I just don't think they're getting their fair shake. Obviously people are super hateful towards the Clippers, Lakers fans, Clippers fans. I know they have a, big beef there. I'm not really here to get in the middle of that, right? I'm just saying I think the Clippers, when I'm objectively looking at their roster, I think they're a lot more dynamic than they were last year defensively, and offensively, I still think they have the top end talent to get it done, and a lot of good role players on both sides of the floor, right? So they have, one of the best coaches in the league, Tyronn Lue, who raises their floor a little bit more, and so I think they're 10th, man. That doesn't disparage any other teams behind them, who we'll talk about in a second, but again, I know this one's going to be controversial. I just think, that's where I stand, and again, a lot of these, anywhere from 13 to 7, this is all up in the air, right? Like I could see a world where the Clippers are 13th. I could see a world where they're 6th or 7th, right? I could see a world where the Phoenix Suns are 5th. I could see a world where they're 10th. So there's a very thin margin for a lot of these teams. I'm just, basically giving my thoughts on where that actually stacks up, right? So Clippers at 10, that rounds out the play-in tournament. Now let's get into the last 3 teams. Let's get it, folks. So coming in at number 11, again, a lot of people aren't going to like this. I have the Golden State Warriors, all right? And so you do have obviously a top 10 player in the world in Steph Curry, one of the greatest players of all time. Steph is still an elite talent. He's still a top 10 player, just an impact on the floor offensively that no player really ever has in the way that he does, all right? That is not going to change next season. He's going to put up great offensive numbers. He's going to lead this team somewhere around a play-in spot. And I think, the lack of having another star next to him is really going to hurt this team. I just think their ceiling is super low compared to some of these other teams without having that second star. You could say it's Kuminga who takes a step up. I could see a world where that happens. I don't don't have the proof yet, right? I could be totally wrong. I think in a world where Kuminga and Podziemski, break out as like star caliber players, you could see the Warriors near the playoff range. You could see them, close to 6-5 seed. If Steph's on his game and all that stuff happens, you have a ton of depth. Defensively, obviously still have Draymond Green, who's a great playmaker, good rebounder, great defender, and great off-ball role player. You also bring in Kyle Anderson. I like that addition. I think he, adds a lot of playmaking and size, two-way versatility to the Warriors. You have, at the center position, TJD and Kevon Looney, who I think are perfectly serviceable enough, to fill that center role, stagger those minutes. I actually think TJD could, kind of make a good two-way impact, breakout-wise next season as well. You also bring in DeAnthony Melton, Buddy Hield to replace a lot of that shooting. DeAnthony Melton's going to be a great player for this team on defense. And you have guys like Gary Payton, you have guys like Moses Moody, and, best of all the role players, Andrew Wiggins. If we see a leap from Andrew Wiggins next season into the, 2022 version of him, clearly this team's a lot better. But, just going off the way his career has basically descended over the last couple of years, it's not looking good for Wiggins. He's obviously a very talented two-way player, one of the best two-way wings in the league when he's at the top of his game. I just don't know if I love him, for a massive leap in production. I just don't know. We just have to see it, right? And so if we see all those things happen, this team is loaded with depth and they have the top end superstar that they need to be somewhere between the play-in tournament and a low playoff seed. If everything goes right and all the things I'm saying ring true, that could happen. I just see the most predictable outcome being around 11 or 10, okay? I just give the Clippers a slight edge. I think they have a little bit more versatility on both ends, okay? Particularly defensively as well. But I think the Warriors, again, it's a lot of question marks, but they're kind of in a little bit of a transitionary year. Maybe they're gearing up. They have a few expiring contracts. Maybe they're gearing up to make a big signing next season. Maybe they're gearing up for the deadline. They certainly have a lot of tradable assets and stuff like that. But, obviously the depth on this team is insane. It's amazing at all positions. But I just think as far as their ceiling, it's a lot lower than some of these other teams. So maybe I'm crazy for that. Let me know down in the comment section. At number 12, we're going to have the Houston Rockets. And again, there's, the team I haven't talked about yet. There's going to be a lot of people that are upset with me. The Houston Rockets, though, okay, this team could be anywhere from 12 to, I think, 8, right? Like, I think that's kind of fair. Maybe 12 to 9. I think this team could be in a play-in situation if everything goes well. Jalen Green, Alfred Sengun take a big step up. You could see them in the play-in tournament, 100%. Fred VanVleet, Dillon Brooks, these veterans are there, going to provide a lot more value like they did last season. They were great for them last season. Steven Adams coming back off of injury could be good for their interior presence. You add Reed Shepherd in the draft, who I think, obviously, in my opinion, one of the best players in the draft. He's going to make a splash offensive impact on this team. This guy's an absolute stud offensively. I think he, clearly is one of your best offensive players right away. And there's just another team that's just loaded with depth. There's about 12, 13 players on this roster that could, realistically see a big jump up in production as far as their, breakout type of season goes. We have guys like Tari Eason. We have guys like Cam Whitmore. These guys are, could be in for that type of breakout. If I would bet money that at least one of those guys out of all of their, young, great talented players take a giant, like star caliber leap. All right. So Alperen Sengun, in my opinion, already a star. Jalen Green, it could be him. It could be Tari Eason, who is a great defender. It could be, Cam Whitmore offensively. It could be Reed Shepherd as a breakout rookie. I bet one of these guys takes a big leap. And then you have so much depth on this team. Great coach in Ime Udoka. I think their floor is pretty high. I think, around 40 wins is where you could see the Rockets. But even like a 40-win team in the West, it just might not make the play-in. Like, there's just so many good teams. It's crazy. That last year, the Rockets went 41-41 and missed the play-in tournament. Like, the same thing's going to happen again, I think, but the Rockets are just setting themselves up for a great future. And I don't think necessarily this season is the one you're going to try to go all in, right? You have a ton of tradable assets. Again, something could happen by the deadline. I don't expect it to for the Rockets, but this is about the future with the Rockets. And you just want to see a little bit, similar type of production winning wise as you did last year, in my opinion. And the main thing is you want to see out of all of these, young talented pieces, which one's going to take that leap. Then you make all your decisions on who you want to keep, who you want to get rid of. But I think for now, they're somewhere between 12 and, 9. And I think that's pretty safe to say. And I just think they're kind of on the lower end of that for me personally. Again, not a bad thing. There's plenty of good things to take out of all of these teams and trying to do my best. But the last team on the list, the San Antonio Spurs. A lot of people think the Spurs are either going to be a playoff team or play-in team. Again, this team is highly volatile in terms of predictions, right? I personally could see a world where the Spurs are realistically a play-in team, and I wouldn't bat an eye. They're anywhere from 13 to like 7 for me. Like their ceiling is so high if everything goes well, and their floor is a little bit lower than, if everything everything doesn't, right? Wemby is going to be an all-NBA player this season. He's going to have a all-NBA third, second team caliber season. No question in my mind for me. But is that enough to get them above some of these other teams that are just loaded with, guys around them? I know the Spurs have made great additions this offseason. Drafting Stephon Castle, one of my favorite players in the draft, is going to be a dynamic defender in this league, lockdown perimeter guy, good playmaker, great finisher. Chris Paul is going to provide so much great point guard play and decision making from that position. Obviously, Trey Jones off the bench for the point guard position. And then Devin Vassell, who is, probably the second best player on this team. He is going to add so much shot creation. I think he takes a big leap next season as well. Harrison Barnes, just a good floor spacing veteran forward, right? And then you have guys like Sohan, who could, see a little bit more of hopefully a leap in efficiency. And then Keldon Johnson, another talented wing, right? So there's just so much to like about this team, right? But again, this is another team that, is gearing towards the future. And so if everything goes well, again, this is a play-in team for me. I don't necessarily see a world where they're a playoff team. I know Wemby's great, and I know he's going to be a superstar caliber player next season. I know he's taking that leap, right? 100% he is. But I just don't know even if that's enough, like in this Western Conference. It cannot be understated how great the talent pool of teams is in this West. And so you're going to have to go above and beyond even to make a play-in tournament in this Western Conference. And I just don't see the Spurs there yet. I think 2026 is where they really start to put it together. Again, they could be a play-in team this season. Maybe I'm underestimating Wemby's, superstar play next season. I could be. I expect them to take the leap. I just don't think it's enough, right? I think they need a better second or third star to propel them into like playoff contention, even if Wemby, is all NBA first team caliber center. I don't know. I just think that, in the East, if this Spurs team was in the East, that goes for all these teams that miss the play-in. I think they're, play-in teams, no question, but just the West, the way it goes, man. But so that is the list. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Obviously, you're going to disagree with some of this stuff. Let me know down in the comment section what it is. Please, if you do disagree, just try to give a substantial argument of why you disagree. Like, don't just say, oh, D-Habe, you're delusional, or you don't know what you're talking about. Like, tell me why I'm delusional. Tell me why I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm much more likely to agree with you or, hear your feedback and agree with it and change my mind if you say stuff like that. So please let me know down in the comment section what I did wrong, what I did good. Hopefully I, didn't say anything too crazy. I tried my best, put a lot of, effort into this video. Again, this is a 3-part series. Keep up with the channel, subscribe if you haven't already, because 1, we're really close to 14K. Who knows? You could be the 14K subscriber. But 2, this is again 3-part series. So, next video is going to be the Eastern Conference, and then we're gonna at the 3rd video to round it all out do the playoff rankings and my playoff predictions going into the season. This will all be coming within the next 7 days. So please subscribe to the channel. You guys don't want to miss that. I really appreciate you watching to the end. Please leave a like on the video if you could. Let's shoot for 15 likes on this video. I hope that can happen. Really helps out the video, helps new people find it. Again, feedback is always appreciated. Follow my Twitch, follow my Twitter. I'm going to be streaming on Twitch pretty regularly, 2K25 content. Follow my Twitch if you can. Follow my Twitter to, stay engaged with me. I will catch you guys in the next video. These are my Western Conference rankings for the 2025 season. Next one will be the East, and after that, the playoffs. That's where, the really fun stuff happens and the really bad predictions happen. But hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day today. This is your boy D-Habe, and as always, peace.